change up the seminar and just put this around here. Take one sheet. Instead of doing the importance of cell group first, I'll do the role of a CG leader. And the reason is we only have one discussion. And I think we can discuss on this topic more than the first seminar. So, huh? You can do it now.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So let me switch up the seminar. So after this, let's not call it a seminar. Let's call this a discussion where I want you to get involved and chip in, because I don't know everything and I'm not going to cover everything. And you guys can chip in with your illustrations, examples, and fill in what I missed. All right? So I want you to really do that. Fill in what I missed. Okay? So I don't want to be the only one talking. Just raise your hand and just chip in, all right, each point. The only reason I'm standing is because my back is sore, so I'd rather, usually we'll be sitting down, all right? First of all, I want to start with how your role is very, very important, all right? The church is supposed to grow bigger and grow smaller at the same time, right? Church is supposed to grow bigger and grow smaller at the same time, meaning worship is a big group, right? We're supposed to get bigger, right? But we're also supposed to get smaller, meaning we have to have cell groups, break up into cell groups. And we see this in the book of Acts where they worshipped in the temple, but they also met in their house, right? So we see the large gathering, also the small cell group gathering in their homes. So this is a biblical picture. I'll talk about this in the afternoon about the importance and why.
What the Bible says about cell group, I'll talk about that more. Your role is very, very important, and I think of you as pastors or shepherds of each have your own church, right? So you're in charge. The pastors are in charge of the big group. You guys are in charge. You're pastors of the cell groups, right? My last church, I said, how's your church doing? Right? Because you're the pastor of the cell church. So, it's very important. Your role is very important because what a healthy body has healthy cells. Right? Healthy body has healthy cells. And I want Jim to be known by, more for their cell groups, not for, other things. But I think, this is a very, very important ministry. Right? And I'm going to talk about the importance of your role later on, but our purpose is, there's a lot of Sunday Christians, right, who come to church on Sundays. They just have a vertical, and then they just go home, right? But you can never grow in that manner, and then we have to continue to draw them into the cell group. And cell group is where discipleship happens, right? And I think only in the cell groups can discipleship happen. It can happen in the large group, right? So because your role is important, the first thing is that we have to be at the meetings. Right, that's the number one. Right? And then, so I announced this meeting like 2 months ago to both, right? So, that's very important. So, I thought of today as a very important day where I could just go over the basics and that we'll be on the same page of, the expectations. So that's why we recorded. So others can be on the same page. But one thing we can start doing is when we have meetings, make sure we're there. And that's why the leaders, we try hard to announce this ahead of time. Right? Yes, we're very thankful, but we also really want to encourage you to the next step by being at the meetings. 10 a.m. has meetings on the third Sunday of every month, right? So please, make that a priority for the 10 a.m. And 2 p.m. we have there's a meeting on the 4th Saturday. So please, we're only gonna have one once a month, right? So I really bargain with Henry instead of twice to once a month. So please, we want that to be like a mandatory. It's not only training, but it's to be on the same page. So I want to start off there. Let's prioritize the meetings together. Okay? Alright. So you got my point there. Alright. So let me start, let me flip it and let me start with the role of cell group leaders. How to be an effective cell group leader. So, and I only have 4 points here. And it's not very exhaustive. Alright. So after this list, you guys can add some more. You guys can, alright. But let me start with this. Like always, it's not from my brain, it's from a book, and it's from this book here. It's called Lead Small, and it's written by Reggie Joiner. And you might not know him, but you might know his partner, which is Andy Stanley. Right? I want to say I agree everything with him. But this church is known for small groups in the U.S. There are churches in Georgia, suburbs of Atlanta, about maybe 20-30 minutes away. And I went to the conference last year. They're really known for, they have this conference called the Orange Conference. They're known for their high school, no,
ages 3 to high school. They're known for that ministry. So I went there for the education department, but I think it's very applicable for adults too, as a cell group leaders. So they talk about 5 points, and the only reason I have only 4 points here is I left out 1 point, which was engage the parents. Right? Because it's adult ministry, we don't want to engage their parents. But if you're doing children's ministry, that is probably the most important point there, engaging the parents. So I left that one out, okay? So everything's from this book here, and a lot of the things I say is verbatim, so that's just a disclaimer right there, okay? All right, so let me start here, 4 points, but I think these are some very key ones, okay? And please feel free to raise your hand and to contribute, okay? And to add, or if you have any illustration, right? So number 1 is be present, right? This is the first and most important thing you can do as a CG leader. Be present, right? Sounds very simple, but it should be simple, but it's not always the hardest, easiest thing, right? God understands the need for humans to connect. So God created us with a need for community, right? So God knew that man was, it wasn't good for man to be alone, so God created Eve, right? The Trinity is an illustration of, community, and God created us for community. When I started off in my Christian faith, I was very spiritual, too spiritual. I thought I only needed God, right? I didn't need any other relationship, right? And then I went to seminary, I learned, and when I took counseling, I realized how important human relationships are, okay? Jesus chose 12, not the crowd, right? Jesus displays the small group as well, right? The importance of community, the importance of relationship, okay? Right, so through the example of Jesus, he only chose 12. And so when I think about that, even pastors, right? The most effective church is when pastors are not, if they have a few leaders, right? If they have too many leaders that they have to look over, it's going to be ineffective too. So that's why I try to empower the CG leaders, and I try to empower even more the officers, right? I cannot oversee all the CG leaders. We have more than 30. We have 35, right? So for a pastor to oversee 35 CG leaders, that's incapable. Even Jesus couldn't do it, right? So it's important that there's a funnel, and that's why we have the officers, and that's 8 or 9 people there. That's manageable by a pastor, works through that, okay? So even Jesus displays here, he focuses on the 12. If you look at Paul, think about the Christianity then. No buildings, no choir rooms, no praise bands, no kids program. It was just simply a community, right? They gathered in houses after they worshiped together in the temple, right? So church wasn't really a place, but church was a group, okay? First Thessalonians, chapter 2:8 says, "So we care for you because we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." Right? So the cell group is not only teaching, but it's, I would say, primarily sharing your life and applying the Bible. Of course, teaching, but I would say that's not as important as sharing your life and applying the Bible, right? And speaking truth and encouraging, right, by sharing your life, okay? Right. So let me start with first point here of be present. Show up predictably, right? Show up predictably. Predictable, right? Be committed.
Be predictable. Sure. What does that mean? For us, it means to show up every Sunday. Right? That's the first and most important thing you can do. Come to church every Sunday. Right? First and most important thing. Your cell group member comes to church on Sunday and they don't see you, right? You're gonna lose trust. Right? So a lot of things I'm gonna say today is very simple. It's very sense, but it will really, I think there's a, right here. Oh, you got it there, okay, thank you. Right? So don't miss on church on Sundays as much as possible. Right? Of course you can go on trips once or twice or, those, we understand, but you must be there, okay? And after the worship service ends, right, it's good that you're present and approach each of your welcome them, okay? This is the bare minimum of your job description, right? It starts here, the most important thing you can do. Predictably, consistently, regularly, right? Showing up. So, you can't do the rest, right, on this sheet unless you did the first one here. Okay? And that's the most important way you build trust, by being there. Okay? Like I said, with the 10 a.m., right? That's important for a pastor too, right? A pastor has to be there, predictably. A pastor has to be here, not under a year, but over a year. Right? It's after, I think it's after a year or two that the pastor gains trust from the congregation, right? As he or she is there predictably every week, right? It's just like that for the cell group leaders as well. Okay? So everyone needs someone who knows their name and what's happening in their life, right? Okay. Number 2, show up mentally. What does this mean? Being energetic, right? You gotta be happy to be at church, happy to have cell group, fully attentive, eager to listen to others. Okay. It's one thing to be there with your body, but it's totally different to be there mentally. So what does this mean? What does this look like? Don't look at your phone. Right? Don't daydream as they're sharing the cell group. Engage with the group. So yeah, during the cell group, right, show attention. One small mistake could kind of ruin the trust, right? Showing up mentally means what? Also being prepared, okay? With the content. So I send out the summary. I try to send it out as soon as possible, Thursday. sometimes Friday. This week I haven't turned it in yet. But I'll try my best to turn it in early. But being prepared mentally means reading those notes, being aware of the content, but also applying to your life. First, you must apply that word to your life, right? And I think be affected by that word, and also being the first one to share how you've been affected by that word, right? So I think that's what it means to show up mentally, right? Being prepared. Okay? So that's the second part. Show up mentally. Number 3 is show up randomly. Okay? What does this mean? Show up at a time and a place they weren't expecting. Right? Anyone have done that for their cell group member? Showing up randomly. Right, this is like a random phone call. Just calling them out of the blue.
Right? Or a birthday card. Or a text message. How about that? A lot of you guys do that, right? Okay. Social media post. Maybe a postcard from your trip. Okay. Attending their funeral when they lose a loved one. Attending significant events of their lives. Anyone? Maybe they were sick in the hospital. Visiting them. All right.
Like as a surprise without telling them?
Oh, no. Well, it doesn't have to be a surprise, right? Like those kind of events, right? How have you showed up to members of your cell group?
When Megan had a surgery, we went and visited her.
Megan?
We went and visited her.
Okay, all right. So Amelia showed up to Megan while she was in the hospital?
She drove my mom to the hospital one day.
Okay, good. How did you feel?
I was very, very grateful.
Okay, all right. So, as a cell group leader, you should be the first person to, be there for your cell group, right? This is your role. Pastors can't be there for every congregation, for every member of the congregation, right? You have to be the first line, right? And then the pastor as the next line, okay? As the church gets bigger, this is more impossible for a pastor, right? After a congregation gets over 200, it's very hard for a pastor. So the cell group leaders should be the first line, okay? I think I shared this illustration with somebody. Rick Warren shares this. There's this guy who went to, what's the church's name? Rick Warren's church. Saddleback, right. He went to Saddleback for 10 years. And then he got sick, he was in the hospital. And then he complained because no one in the church visited him. And so Rick Warren said, have you joined the cell group in the past 10 years? And he said, never. And Rick Warren said, it's your fault. If you had a cell group, your cell group leader would have been here. Your cell group members would have all been here at the minimum, right? Okay. So I want to say the first person in line to do these visitations is a cell group leader, and then the cell group members, right? And then the next line is the pastors, okay? So yeah, as a CG leader, this is very important to be there at significant events of their lives, good or bad. And so yeah, CG leader, to be an effective one is to sacrifice your time, sacrifice maybe your resources, right? Okay, so that's what it means. You are the first line, and then the pastors. Okay, right? So when the first point is be present. When you are present, they trust you and open up. Okay, so I think this is a very important first point. Very simple, right? And if we, but it's a good reminder. Be present. Show up predictably. Show up mentally, and show up randomly. If we only do this, we'll be very successful. Okay, right? So before a pastor finds out about your member, you should find out beforehand, right? You should know the member more than the pastor knows that member, okay? Right? That should be your goal, okay? And you should be informing, significant events to, the director, and then I guess that's the best
method here. Okay? Alright, so if there's I'll talk about the new. Alright, so that's the first point. Second one is create a safe place. Create a safe place. Right, and number one is lead your group. So create a safe place is create a safe environment where they can feel really vulnerable, comfortable to open up. Okay? Lead your group. Lead your group to what? Value acceptance. Okay? If you want members in your group to share openly, there has to be acceptance, an attitude of acceptance in your group. Okay? No matter what they say or think, first allow them to just speak it out. Of course, you don't want to leave them there. You want to gently correct them. But acceptance, causing other members to accept other members is very important. Okay? Acceptance can be established in little things by showing how much you care, right? Being happy to see them, giving them eye contact as they talk, or as you talk, getting on their level, right? Leaning in as they talk, right? Showing interest. So the more often you can be positive and specific, the more you'll build an atmosphere of acceptance. But acceptance is fragile. It's broken by something as simple as an eye roll, right? Oh man, there she was, talking forever, right? Or like if you sigh when they're talking, you can lose their trust, right? Or a glowing smile, like, I know what you're gonna say, like that. So that can really throw off acceptance. So you have to be a little bit careful. Okay? You can consistently protect your field from the risk of rejection by celebrating everyone equally. Make sure don't favor one over the other. Right? It's very important. Giving everyone equal opportunity. Right? Celebrating everyone equally. That's very important as I raise two kids, right? If I give one interest to one side a little bit more, the other side gets jealous, right? But adults are all the same, right? So you want to make sure that you don't give, poor acceptance to one or the other. Shutting down gossip. Right? That's a big thing that you have to watch out. If there's gossip, it's hard to have an attitude of acceptance. Privately addressing individual issues as they arise. When you see someone that's out of line, talking, maybe being rude, or maybe just dominating, you want to deal with that person individually, right? Not in front of that whole group, but and then if they're kind of, ruining the attitude of acceptance, you want to, separately, kind of gently, kind of speak truth into them, right? So while it may not be realistic for everyone to fully accept each other at all times, if they see the leader trying, they will, they will think that this group is a safe place that values acceptance. Okay? If they feel safe with you, they will share. Alright? Okay, so try to create acceptance, and number two is, this is still the first point, okay, lead your group. Try to value confidentiality. Okay? Value acceptance, try to promote acceptance, try to value confidentiality, right? So this is the first thing you want to do for the 2 p.m. as you meet tomorrow. Say, whatever we say stays in the group.
It's the most difficult to monitor, confidentiality, right? You won't find out until it's breached, okay? So your job is to balance the tension between what? Encouraging confidentiality and knowing when to stop people from sharing too much, right? You want to balance that. You want them to be confidential, but you want to kind of stop them when they're sharing too much, right? Because you know that it might bite them later on, right? So we have to be realistic. When one shares something so personal that might hurt him or her later, try to prompt discretion, right? Well, I think this is enough here. Try to gently stop them. Okay. Right. And then third attitude that you want to promote is honesty. Okay? Acceptance, confidentiality, and honesty. Okay? Honesty is the only way for your group to be themselves, right? We want the real them in the group, right? Not the fake them, the churchy Sunday them. We want them to be able to share their doubts. Okay? We want them to ask questions. We want them to admit struggles. So I love when people email me and say, "Hey, there's a problem going on." Right? It's a sign of, you know, when people do that, if they give up on a group, they will never speak up, right? But the reason why they speak up is they feel like there's hope for change. So that's a good thing, right? So you want church to be a safe place where, you know, they don't have to think, I have to be perfect, right? But a place where they can be honest about themselves, their doubts, their questions, their struggles, right? So we want them to feel that this is a place not for those who have it together, but those who are, you know, in the works, right? Okay. So is your group a place that can do that, or are you guys just sharing, you know, oh, you know, I'm doing this well, right? If they can't be there Monday through Saturday self when they're with you on Sunday, they will have a hard time applying their faith to their everyday lives. Okay? Right? So how do you know you have this, you're leading your group well? They're bringing their Monday through Saturday self on Sunday. And they're showing their true self, right? If they can't share their doubts in community, they will dwell on them privately. We don't want them, right? We want them to work out their faith in community. If they can't ask you their questions, they're going to ask someone else, right? You rather that they come to you, right, for godly counsel. If they don't admit their struggles to someone, they will never experience the power of bringing things to light in a way that facilitates freedom and forgiveness. Okay? So how do you know if you're being a good leader? They're able to share the deep things in their life, right? That shows they trust you. They show you that you're a person of grace. So encourage the honesty, okay? How do you encourage honesty in your group? You react with grace, even to shocking things that they might share or say. Okay? You prove to them that your involvement in their lives is unconditional. Right? So the three attitudes that you want to form in the group: acceptance, being confidential, and number three, honesty. Right? So that's still create a safe place, lead your group. So you model honesty in the way you share with them. Right? They'll be honest as you are honest with them. Okay? But as you are honest with them, be careful that you're honest to a point. Okay? As a leader, it's good to be honest, but there's some guidelines here. You want to ask yourself, how will this story benefit them? What am I trying to accomplish through my honesty? Why am I sharing this? Okay, so make sure your honesty is beneficial to them. Okay. So that's the first one. Okay. Anyone want to jump in? Jump in. All right. Number two is respect the process. This is where you have to be patient with them. Right. Patience is the hardest thing as a leader. Right? You want change fast. Right? When you get married, patience is the hardest thing. When you have children, patience is the hardest thing. If you're a leader, being patient is the hardest thing. Respect the process. Right? Authentic faith is a continual progress. It's not a straight line that progresses up, right? It's a molding, crafting, shaping, and changing of faith through time, life experience, and reflection. Right? Every once in a while, your group will ask a question or make a statement about what they believe that will make you cringe. Right? Respect their process. Make church a safe place to ask any questions. Your goal isn't to give correct answers to all of their questions. That's not the goal. As though you have all the answer. Right? You don't have to have all the answers. in order to be a cell group leader? I don't know all the answers. This past week, somebody asked me a question, a serious, a question that really was affecting his life. I didn't know. I said, hold on, let me get on the internet. Let me look. Okay. So you don't have to know. I say I don't know a lot of times. Right? People laugh, but I don't know. So it's okay to say I don't know. Right? Share your experiences. Look up scripture together. Ask your officers. Ask your pastor. Right? It's about journeying together. Okay? That's what a cell group leader is. Just because they ask weird questions doesn't mean they have lost their faith, right? Just like us, they're in the middle of the unique process of clarifying authentic faith. Okay? Sometimes you lead them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you feel like they're never changing, right? And it's frustrating, but we need to respect the process. We have to trust that God loves them, us even more, and God will lead them. Okay? Respect. Number 3 is guard the heart. Guard the heart. Okay. This is where, yes, we're going to say we're going to be confidential, but if your life is in danger, we're going to have to, I'm going to get outside help for you. Okay. So we can never promise 100% confidentiality, right? As a leader, there's no way to promise that. We create a safe place by sometimes we have to, report to the authority above us. Okay, what are those 3 instances? When they're being hurt by others. Okay, being hurt by others. This is not just physically, but it could be emotionally, right? So when that's the first. Being hurt by others, we need to report that. So you need to report to your officers, your pastors. Second is when they're hurting others, we need to report that. Number 3 is when they're hurting themselves.
Isn't that everything?
I'm sorry?
Isn't that everything?
Everything
Everything they share would be included in one of the categories.
What do you mean?
Like whatever they share about their life's struggle would belong to one of the categories.
So we have to separate between the emergency and the non-emergency, right? Okay. So when I did youth ministry in America, in some areas, a lot of kids struggle with cutting themselves, suicidal. The shocking thing was the reason they cut themselves is because physical pain is better than emotional pain. That's what they said. Right? So those things I report to their parents right away. Right? I tell them I'm sorry, I can't keep this one a secret. So I call them parents right away. So if any of these 3 things, if it's an emergency, you would have to let the person above you know right away. Okay, so in order to save them. So that's the guard the heart. Creating a safe place. That's the second point. Right? Lead your group through acceptance, confidentiality. What was the third one? Honesty, right? And then respect the process, which means, don't get frustrated because they ask the dumb question. Oh no, am I a bad leader? Are they going back to 0? But respect the process, right? Number 3 is guard the heart. We want them to be a safe place where we were protecting them. Okay. All right. Number 3. Anything you guys want to jump in for the first 2? I think they were all very important points. If we do just these 2, we'll be a very, very good cell group leader. Being there and creating a safe place. Right? Is your group have your group been a safe place? Are people being vulnerable and really sharing the deep things that are going in their life, right? Or is it just superficial, right? Okay. So we want to really go deeper, sharing life, not sharing kind of the superficial things, right? Okay. All right. Number 3, make it personal. Everyone has influence, whether good or bad, right? How much more, right? As a CG leader, okay. So there is no denying of the power of example. Okay. We've been inspired by in the past from other leaders. Your, the most important person you need to lead is yourself, right? That's the main point in this one. Before you lead others, you need to lead yourself. So being a good leader is not teaching, not doing, but being, right? It's about the examples that you are showing them. Okay, they learn from you, right? So the most important thing about parenting is modeling it, right? And it's the same for leaders. Okay. Oop, there's my notes here. My back here. Oop. Let me get to my notes here. Okay. Right. So what do you have to do? You have to make sure your personal life is in order, right? Make sure you are living an example you want your group to follow, right? Because your group has a front row seat to your life. So the question is, what are they watching through your life? Is it just a show, or is it real life adventure pursuing God? What if your personal growth could really be their front row seat to what God wants to do in their lives, right? How are you worshiping? I'm sure your members are seeing how my cell group leader worships, right? Or what they do. Okay. So if your group wants to have a healthy relationships, they need to see it in you. If you want your group to set boundaries, they need to see it in you. If your group wants to be confident in who God made them to be, they need to see it in you, right? So modeling it is very important, okay? So number one is live in community. What does this mean? The cell group that you are leading is for them. So you need a community for yourself, where you get, okay? The community you live in with your, all right, so as a CG leader, you are giving in that group. So you need to find another group where you family, right? So we should, our spouse is in our children of our church, our first church that God has given us to take care of. And then this physical church is the next priority. So we have to show them the priority, right? So we don't want any of you to neglect your first church for our second church here, right? But also not to take the other stream where you only care about your first church and not this church here, okay? So you want to set your priorities and live according to those priorities and model that to yourself, okay? Number three is be real. Okay, just be you. Find ways to relate to your group without compromising who you really are, because it's more important for them to see the real you, a live person that is still growing, learning, and trying to live out authentic faith than it is for them to have another friend, right? It's okay. You don't have to put on a show that you're perfect. You can share your vulnerability, right? Being the real you is the best, right? So they tell all the preachers, the best preacher is the person that is the real you. Don't try to emulate anyone else, but be the real you. Show. Sometimes you fail, right? Okay. So that's number three. Make it personal. Model it. That's the best way you can lead them, leading yourself. And number four, move them out. What is a sign of a good leader? It's not what you do, but it's what your students do. Right? I think this is very important. How do we choose leaders? First, we are good at what we do, and then you're chosen as a leader. But leadership is not what you do. Success is seeing what your students do as a result of your leading. Okay. So leadership is hard because it's not dependent on how well you do, but how well your students do, how much they change. So that's why leadership is hard. Okay, and that's what the fourth point is. A good leader is not what you do, but what your members do. Okay, we're trying to move them out of the circle. You understand that what happens inside your group is measured by what happens outside your group. So number one, you want to move them to someone else. Move them to someone else. How do you ensure that your members will be in the church, will be growing in their faith? You need to help them form relationships, not just in your group. The more relationships they have in the church, the harder for them it is to leave the church, leave their faith. So you want to connect them to other people outside the group. Okay? And it's very important. Why do a lot of people leave the church? It's because of relationship. They have no one to connect with. Okay? So this is very important. Every studies have shown. Even for children's ministry, have 5 adult influences, mentors in their life in the church, and they will have faith for their entire life. Right? Number 2, move them to be the church. And this is very important. Encourage them to partake in the mission of the church. Right? So you want to move them out. Hey, volunteer for this. There's an opening for welcoming team or youth teacher or children's ministry. You want to move them out. Hey, we have this event coming. You want them to move them out. Attend events, family retreat. This is a very, very important role that you have. Make them partake in the mission of the church and the events of the church. Right? So this is one of the most important things. Encourage them to take roles. Because why? For all of us, significance is very important. Okay? And when they have a significant role, they'll feel significant and they'll be plugged to the church. So what the leaders are trying to do is we're trying to create more roles and have people who don't have roles to fill those roles. All right? I read this book where, the elderly, when they're in the care homes, they do nothing, right? But one way to really, revive them is to give them an important role, right? And they have a sense and a purpose of living, and they actually get healthier, right? It's for us too. So that's one of the things, important things you can do is encourage them to partake in a ministry, and even events. All right. So how do we know also success that we're leading well? The numbers are, more of your members are attending events, volunteering. Okay. Number 3 is move them to what's next. Move them to what's next. What does this mean? As a leader, you need to find another leader and raise them up. Okay. You want to spot potential leaders and train and raise them. Okay. He actually talks about see what's next in their lives, and your responsibility is to do everything you can to prepare them for the next stage of life. This is what he says. But I think in our context, raising next leaders. Or this is another example. Someone introduced me to this young pastor, he graduated from university, and then he will go to seminary, and then so I wanted to mentor him. All right, so I told him, hey, how about we meet once a month, and I'll give you 2 books to read every month, and we'll meet and we'll discuss that book. Right, so I just wanted to prepare him for the next season of life as he attends graduate seminary, and as he becomes a pastor. I wanted to prepare him for the next stage. So that's what we are called to do as leaders, to build the next leader. Right? What is a cell? The purpose of cell is to grow and to split. Right? To grow and split. So, right. So all of us are here because we did well, right? But leader is something else. Leader is making others do well, right? And that's the challenge, and that's the next step. And a lot of times we're frustrated because we do well, but we can't get others to do well, right? But that's the hardship of leadership. And leadership takes many years. It took me 3 years, the same congregation, to finally see results. So don't be discouraged there. Okay, so these are 4 things, not exhaustive at all, but I think these are 4 very important things that we can do as a leader. We'll stop it here and then let me get your. Can you see my face?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little
Okay.
bit.
The top of your head, I think, is cut off a little bit.
No, it's fine.
No, no.
No.
Go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So let's. Let me pass out the paper here. Okay,
This is really nice.
pass it down. There. Right. Importance of cell groups. This is what I wanted to start off with. But for the sake of discussion, I switched it up. Okay. Right. Importance of cell group. Is cell group important? Yes, and that's the point I want to make in this one. And if cell groups are important, cell group leaders are important, right? Okay, so I kept saying this phrase, right? A healthy body has healthy cells. So let's look at the organization of the church in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in the Old Testament, you need more?
Get monthly copies?
Oh, no, I have,
Oh, you have one?
yeah. Okay. Right, so Exodus 18:13 to 27, what is that one about? Moses is leading the Israelites. He has to judge the people. There's too many people. He's overburdened. But Jethro, his father-in-law, gives him a wise advice, right? He says, establish men for, I don't remember, like tens of thousands, men of hundreds, or something like that, right? So bring the trivial cases to leaders, right? And then the next level of leaders bring the harder cases, and those cases that's very hard, difficult to resolve, bring it to Moses himself, right? So we have kind of several stages or levels of leadership, right? In charge of tens, in charge of hundreds, in charge of thousands, in charge of tens of thousands, and then Moses at the top, right? So I know politics has a bad rap, but politics is needed, right, to run the church. So we have to make sure that we don't go to the other spectrum of where, because it's been used in the wrong way, it's been abused, that it's bad. No, right? All things are good if we use it in a godly way, and if we use it how God intended us to use it. Okay, so that's an Old Testament example here. Okay, New Testament example is Ephesians 4:11 through 14. And did I preach this on Sunday? I don't think I did. Right? This is about how. Did I preach this one? Ephesians 4.
What is it?
It's about how God gave gifts to the church, which are pastors and preachers. Right? They equip the body, and they equip the lay people to do the works of ministry. So I think I did. The main role of the pastor is to preach and teach and equip the people, and the people actually administer and run the church and does ministry. Okay, so this is a New Testament example of how the lay people are to do the ministry. And we see this in the book of Acts too, right? The pastors were busy filling the needs of the widows of Hebrews. So they raised up leaders lay leaders to serve these people, and free the pastors to evangelize, preach the gospel, and pray. Okay, so actually the ministering, the care is the responsibility of the lay leaders, the cell group leaders. Okay, and we see these two models here in both the Old Testament and New Testament. That God ordained cell groups, right? Okay.
Pastor,
Yes.
you preached on Wednesday night.
Oh, did I preach on Wednesday?
Yes.
Not on Sunday?
There was a similar.
Maybe the week before you
He
mentioned it.
touched on it. Touched
Yes.
on it. a
Okay.
little.
But on Wednesday you did it.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't remember. I recycle too much there. I don't know. Okay. All right. So cell groups. Let me give you 9 reasons why cell groups are important. Okay. Cell groups meaning small groups. Okay. A church that only has large groups or Sunday worship can't do these 9 things. Okay. These are only what the cell groups can do. Right? So I'm making the case 9 reasons why cell groups are important and vital. Number 1 is study. Right? In the large group, it's the pastor preaching, one-way communication. No one can interrupt. No one can raise their hand and ask for clarification or question. Preaching is teaching, but should touch the heart, right? And the Bible study is mostly, I would say, geared towards intellectual knowledge. It should be both, but if we say preaching is more of a little bit more of touching the heart than the head, and the study is a little bit more touching the head rather than the heart, right? What cell groups? Cell groups, you can study the Bible, right? You can ask questions. It's a two-way communication, okay? And when I preach, it's very general. But when you guys study in the cell group, now you can really apply specifically into each person's lives, okay? Each person is engaged. While during sermon, it's easy to wander off, right? Because it's a large group. When you're in a small group, cell group, each person is engaged. Each person, can talk and share and respond, right? And also in the cell group, you can learn from each other, right? You teach each other, and you can apply. Okay, so study. That's the first one. Okay. So there's limitations in the large group, in the Sunday service, okay? So I know we do this, in our cell groups, we discuss the sermon. So main thing we want to do is apply it to each other's lives and also share, also what you learned, or maybe what, I can't cover everything, okay? It's limited, it's only 25, 30 minutes. There's so many things to teach in that text, and I have to just go with the main primary points. And so it's in the cell group where you can talk about other points in the text that I can't or I don't have the time to do. Okay? Yes.
So I think it'd be good if you clarify a little bit with what we could study in a small group and what we can't, because like the church has guidelines that we can't bring just like a reference book to come and study, or a devotional book. What's the clarification for that?
Right now, I think all the cell groups are doing the discussion based off the sermon. I think we can be kind of open where if you feel like your group needs a curriculum, then I think we can kind of be free. But I would need to look at the curriculum and check with the church, make sure it's kind of in line with our teaching. Okay, I think devotional wise, like the daily Bible, that's what our church uses, so there's no problem with that. The living life, that's also a big one. I think our church will be fine with that. But just go through me, and I'll check with whoever's above me. Okay, so we have I think maybe 18 cell groups or so, and I don't want to make a rule for all groups. You have to do it this way. I think we can be kind of free where each group has different needs. So if you feel like it's better to go this way, I think it's fine. Okay, so not everyone has to do sermon discussion. So I think room for freedom is flexibility is also okay. Okay, but just check with me with that. Okay, all right. But I think applying the Bible is more important. Okay, that's part of sharing lives, right? Okay. So for the study, while we're at it, a new family, I'm doing that in September on Sundays, at 12 to 1:30. So you want to encourage, right, your cell members to take that class. And in October, I'll do a 9-week Bible study where I just give you the overview of the whole Bible. What is the Bible about? What is the Old Testament about? What is the New Testament about? Well, what are the genres? There's 10 genres in the Bible. What is the genre about? Why are they different? How do you read it? So that's my plan, October, November, December. And then we can look at specific books. So it's to look at the big picture, right? So that's my plan. So I hope if you really want to know the Bible, take that class. There's going to be a daily homework, and then a 30-minute video you have to watch. So you do all your homework at home, and then we come and we go through those, right? So if you take that class, you'll have a really good picture of the whole big picture. And next year for Gem Adult, my plan is, I'm almost there, is on Sundays, go through a 1-year curriculum through the Bible, big story lines of the Bible from Genesis to Revelations in 32 weeks. Okay, and it's to give you a big picture of the Bible in a Christ-centered manner, right? But it won't just be knowledge of the Bible, but every lesson there's an application that will apply to your life. So that's my plan. So hopefully, as we go through that, we will see the big picture of the Bible as well. So that's my plan for study. Okay. All right. And then next year, spring, hopefully I can do some kind of parenting seminar. Okay. And yeah. Right. So number one is study. That's something that we can't do in a large group setting, but right. Number two is accountability. Accountability, only possible in small groups, right? Not possible in large groups, right? Every member should encourage each other to better follow the Lord, right? Accountability is what? Making sure that they're living out the faith, right? So this is a hard one for CG leaders, but we have to go beyond, how was your past week? And just saying, oh, good job, right? We have to also be accountable, which means, encouraging them to live out the faith, encouraging them not to do certain things. It could be rebuking, speaking the truth, right? So this is the uncomfortable one, but we have to do, right? 3 weeks ago, I preached about church discipline, right? So to be a true church, we have to do accountability, right? So I think Henry's good at this. He's good with truth, love, and grace, right? So he really gets to know you, and he knows what you have to improve, and then he thinks of a way to talk to you and approach you, but he does it in a graceful way, right? He's like yeah. So, but that should be all of us, right? Accountability. That's challenging them to take the next step, right, of holiness. Right? If they're missing Sundays often, well, if any of your members not there on Sunday, you should know why they're not there, right? You should know what's going on in their lives. Okay? So this one, right? Very important. If we don't do this, if we don't do church discipline, they won't grow, right? Being a good teacher is pushing them, right? Prodding them to the next step, right? We can't do this in a large group. Right, because it only happens in a cell group, small group where we know each other, right? We know their lives, and so we know what to push them, right? Okay. And that's why discipleship only happens in cell groups, okay? Because accountability only happens in cell groups, right? So please, number 2 is very important. Number 3 is relationship. Right? There's always cliques in larger churches because of the large number, even us. If the number is above 50 in a church, there's going to be cliques, right? So cell groups allow closer relationship, right? So this is very good for shy people. If you have a hard time forming relationship, join a cell group, and you will at least have friends in your cell group, right? Okay. So for the 2 p.m., the reason why we stop the cell group and then restart and we change the groups is we want you to have build new friendships, new relationships in the church. Okay, and I know 10 a.m. is kind of a different dynamic. They only meet once a month, so maybe it's every 2 or 3 year thing or something, right? So each congregation is special, but we think for the 2 p.m., 1 year is good because they meet on a weekly basis. Right? So 1 year is enough to know each other well, and now we want you to build other relationships. Okay? Large setting, people come to church on Sundays, right? You can't form. It's just a superficial. We just have 5 to 10 minutes of coffee and bread, and you can't really get to build a relationship. But cell groups, right? It's a prime way to really get to know each other. Okay? Relationship. right? That's why cell groups is important. Number 4, care for others. Care for others, right? It's hard to care. So one of my philosophy of ministry, or the ideal church, is that every person is known and loved. Every person is known and loved, right? And the only way this happens is through cell groups, right? I can't know everyone and love everyone, so we have to do that, trickle down method. So yeah, it's practically only in the cell groups where we can care for one another and no one is left out, right? You know each other's needs, and we are to meet them. Okay? Right? And like I said before, the caring should, the first line should be within that cell group. Okay? The leader and each other, right? So, and that's how we ensure that everyone is cared for. Right? To ask for help and to provide help. So we have to be vulnerable to ask for help. Sometimes it's hard for us to ask for help, right? But we have to, be willing to ask for help, and then when they ask, to meet that help. Okay, care for others. Number 5, I'm just going through just the basic, right? Discipleship. Now all of this is discipleship, but I say this word, okay. Discipleship only happens because what is discipleship? It's studying, it's accountability, it's relationship, it's caring for others. Okay, discipleship can only happen in the cell group. Number 6, evangelism. Right? Evangelism. How can a cell group evangelize? A lot of people are against the church institution. They have a hard time coming. But if you meet at home, if you meet outside, and invite non-Christians, it's an easier path, right? First they join the cell groups outside of church, and then it could be easier for them to come into church, a stepping stone to church worship, right? Because some people feel uncomfortable, right? So this postmodern era is first building relationship outside of church, and then they come in, right? So, cell group can be an important tool for evangelism. Number 7, focused prayer, right? Every Sunday I pray generic prayers, right? But it's in cell groups where you guys can pray specific prayers, focused prayers, with specific names, specific situation. Okay? In large groups, you don't know who needs prayer, and we don't have time to pray for all. So I think this communication is very, very important, and that's one thing I've been trying very hard in my 4 months here so far. Right, communicating, making sure we have that good channel, right? But I think we have a long ways to go, right? Communicating means also in this meeting where we communicate with one another. One ministry presents, but we can also suggest, we can also challenge, we can also disagree, right? We don't want just a very simple meeting of one ministry reporting, right? And then that's it. But we really want to prod each other. We really want to question and challenge, okay? Right? So a good church is where, these things are happening, okay? And so we really need the CG leaders and officers, right? What does that take? That takes really talking to people a lot, knowing them, right? So communicating, so I put there at number 9. So communicating is very important. Okay? All right, this one's very short. I'm just trying to convince you of the importance of cell group. These are 9 things. I'm sure it's not exhaustive. 9 things that cell groups can do, right? That large groups cannot do, right? And therefore, these 9 things are also your role, right? But we don't expect you to be perfect, but we expect you to be working on these 9 things. All right? Let me shut this off.